Kia ora koutou, good evening everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Shai Navot. I'm the Deputy Leader of TOP and I am very excited to be joined today by our candidates for Whangārei and for Northland. So I have Ciara Swords here. You are up in Whangārei right now?
Yes, I am, yeah.
And Helen Jeremiah is our candidate for Northland. Hey Helen.
Hello.
Now Helen.
Hi here.
Where?
Hi here.
So you are actually staying in a backpackers tonight, am I right, Helen?
That's right, yes.
Everyone, this is what
lounge room.
This is what campaigning on a budget is all about. Sometimes you stay in backpackers. That's how we keep it real at TOP. That's so cool. All right, well, I will let you guys do a quick intro of yourself. So maybe Ciara, if you want to go first, just tell everybody just a little bit about your background and your electorate.
Yeah, well, thanks, Shai. So I am running for TOP and in the Whangārei electorate. I grew up in Whangārei Point, so I'm here in Whangārei Point actually. And so, yeah, I moved to New Zealand when I was 5 from the United Arab Emirates. So I kind of call, I call New Zealand my home. I'm a Kiwi. Yeah, and so my background is in economics. And so I did an economics undergrad at Otago University. I'm currently studying public policy as well through Victoria University as a postgrad certificate. So, I really love TOP's policies because they really get down to what actually works. I learned a lot about the tax system during my undergrad and how we don't have a very good tax system here in New Zealand, and TOP were willing to solve that. So yeah, that's a little bit about me anyway, and I'll pass it back to you, Shai.
Thanks, Ciara. And oh, sorry if the sound goes a bit funky tonight, everyone. I'm trying to run this without my usual headset that I usually wear. So please put any comments in if the sound is not so great. We'll do my best. So Helen, tell us a little bit about you and why you are running up in Northland, the far north.
Yeah, I was brought up in England, of course. We came over with my family and 2 little children in 1975. So we've enjoyed being in New Zealand since then. I brought up my children on my own after my husband died. And while I was doing that, I studied psychology at Whangārei University. And later on, I had some ideas about economics, so I went back and did a graduate diploma, or undergraduate diploma in economics. And then later on, I studied some social policy at Massey. So
definitely seeing a trend with our Northland candidates. Both have a sound knowledge in economics, you would say, a background in economics.
Yeah. And so I moved up to an eco-village in Kaiwaka in 2005. And
What's an eco-village, Helen? Maybe tell some people out there who might not know what an eco-village is.
Well, it's an intentional community that's founded on permaculture principles. So we're trying to live more lightly on the earth. So I'm very aware that there's an awful lot of poverty in Northland, and I think the unconditional basic income is what we need up here.
Well said, very true. Couldn't actually agree with you more. I think of all of our policies, that one would have the fastest overnight impact for so many families all around New Zealand. But you're right, the proportion of poverty is sadly huge in your electorate, and it would make a massive difference, right? So you've both been campaigning, and Helen, you have a lot of ground to cover in your electorate. It is a huge area. What has been the biggest challenge of campaigning in such a big area so far?
Yeah, well, I mean, I have a guilty conscience. I'm driving a hybrid, but even so, you know, I think all these long distances I'm driving, that I'm not doing the climate any good. The first time I travelled around the electorate, I travelled in an electric camper van, and that felt much more sustainable. But it doesn't work out that cheap either. So I decided it's actually cheaper to drive in my hybrid.
Fair enough. Hey, you're still doing a lot better than most, Helen. So we cannot be perfect on everything, and every little bit makes a difference, right? And that actually brings me onto something I wanted to ask you both about, but maybe Ciara, I'll pass this to you, because I think people will be really interested in the hoardings that you have used this year.
Oh, yes. So both Helen and I bought our hoardings from Off the Wall Marketing, and they're fully compostable. So I don't actually know what we have some instructions that I haven't read as of yet, but we have instructions on how to deal with it afterwards, and I believe that they're fully biodegradable.
So awesome. It's so great to see you both and Adriana as well leading the way in this space, and hopefully it's going to become more economic for all parties to do this on large scale going forward, right? Starting small, but it's really cool. I'm sure there'll be lots of people out there really impressed by that commitment that you've got there. So great work, team. I'm so proud that you've been so aware and taken those steps. It's really, really cool.
Thank you.
What has been your favourite thing? Oh, by the way, everybody, I'm so sorry. I will take your questions. So if you have any questions for Ciara or for Helen, plug them in and the team will feed them through to me. Sorry if I didn't say that earlier. So what has been your favourite thing on the campaign trail, if we call it that, so far, Ciara?
I mean, I sort of haven't campaigned for too long, so I don't have a lot of information to go off, but I did really enjoy my first Meet the Candidates event last Friday at the Whangārei Club. I think a lot of people were surprised, I guess, that, to see such a young person campaigning up in Whangārei, and I think they were quite impressed about it, and I got some good feedback, so I think that felt really good. Bit of validation there. But I also think the top community as well has been a really, nice part of it, getting to know the candidates. I spent the weekend in Wellington just last weekend, and so getting to know some of the candidates there and some of the team as well, and just even online, like just knowing like who the top supporters are, and building a sense of community around that has been really awesome.
Yeah. I have to say that is one of my favorite parts about this whole situation, is how incredible our core supporters are, our members, and you don't have to go far to find someone to talk to, or to get help with something. So it's pretty remarkable, I think.
Yeah.
So Helen, what do you think has been your favourite thing so far that you've experienced on this crazy journey when you decided to put your hand up and be a candidate for us?
Yeah, well, I think I really agree with Ciara. It's really great, feeling that we are actually part of a group of people who actually have like minds, which I haven't had a lot of that in my lifetime. I'm usually out on a limb somewhere, feeling different from everybody else.
Yeah,
that's really lovely to have I feel I belong with. But I think possibly the highlight so far has been on the ferry from Whangārei to Kohoko, when I was actually carrying one of my signs across to give to a volunteer on the other side so that he could put it up. And somebody from one of the cars that was traveling with us, so I was just walking on, somebody from one of the cars came out and said, "Are you the top lady?" And he said, "I'm some kind of relation of Jeff's." So I thought that was really lovely. And
so cool.
About Jeff's family. And that was, So that was, lovely coincidence that he was on the ferry when I was.
Definitely. Well, Jeff did grow up in the far north, so perhaps a little bit of a small world up there after all. That's so nice.
It was a cousin of his father's or something. He doesn't think Jeff really remembers him. But I think they were living. They're living in Auckland, but he and his wife were in the car, and they were just enjoying a trip up to the old country.
Nice. And when you've been out and about, and I know because you guys are both out of Auckland, you have been freer than us for longer. So I know you've been both out and chatting with people in your communities and having conversations with people. What for you, Ciara, in Whangārei has been one of the most common concerns or issues that are most important to people going into the election this year?
I don't know if there's like a particular common trend, but I think that the economy in general in Northland and in Whangārei is a little bit more behind compared to the rest of the country. We don't have, a lot of businesses start up and end up failing. There's such a high turnover of shops trying to do their thing, but they just don't really have the support, I guess. And also the population and people with money to actually spend. So I guess that's why I think a universal basic income will be very helpful to people of Whangārei, because people will actually be able to buy the things that they would like and help the businesses around Whangārei in general. We are sort of seeing a big growth in Whangārei, so I think that is starting to change. But unemployment is still a huge thing as well in Northland and Whangārei in general. I think this year it's 10.9% of the working population are on job seekers benefit in Northland. So it's the highest unemployment rate in the country. And I think a lot of that is to do with the welfare trap as well of, people can't really get ahead and actually get full-time work. So there's no point in doing part-time work as well because of that welfare trap.
That's absolutely right. And if there's anyone watching and hearing welfare trap for the first time, that's just the rate of government clawback as you start working. And the government takes so much money off you that for part-time workers between about 5 and 20 hours a week, you really only end up working for between $2 and $4 at best case. So for so many people, there's not only no financial incentive to work, sometimes they're actually worse off when they do. And that's really the welfare trap that Ciara is referring to. And yeah, super prevalent in your region, sadly. Yeah,
another thing I'll add as well is the infrastructure, I guess, is we want to build more infrastructure. And I think the port is a really big concern to try and move it up to Whangārei. A lot of people want that, but councils don't really get the funding to actually put in infrastructure. So that's where our infrastructure policy and, giving GST to the regions, like different councils, would really help Whangārei as well, because they just don't get enough money and that they're having to put up rates, and people obviously don't like that, but it's not really their fault because they just don't get enough of a budget to work with.
Exactly right. And Helen, have you been had the opportunity to speak with any small business owners in your electorate as yet?
Oh yes, I've been popping in and out of all the ones in Russell today.
In Russell?
Yeah, they weren't. I think just general worry about the economy after COVID. The ones that I've met haven't been so much involved in tourism. So I've been mostly the ones in the centre of Russell. Well, I suppose they are involved in tourism, but they are not that sort of directly. But that's always generally a worry how they're going to recover.
It's really tough, right?
Yeah, there's lots of empty shops around.
I guess that Northland in general is quite a seasonal, like our business comes in quite seasonally. People come up in the summertime. And I guess that's also, you know, with tourists not being around, that's obviously not great. But then I guess like the UBI helps with that as well, because, you know, we can sort of have at least a bit of stability throughout the months, you know, through the winter months as well.
Exactly. Definitely. I think we probably don't talk about the seasonal workers enough, right? But the UBI for those people who have really uncertain hours in any given week won't be scared to take on a full week's of work when it's available for fear of losing their benefit, because they'll just always have that basic level of support. So it's great for the growers because they are going to have a more certain supply chain of workers. And get to keep the ones who are doing well, and they don't lose them for fear of that welfare trap. So it would completely change how that workforce is currently working.
Yeah.
Especially because, you know, I think it was on the news again tonight or last night. I'm honestly losing track of my days, but they're talking again about, you know, this concern of not having enough pickers. And that is a really huge concern. We're nearly the end of September already. We're going into that season. So the system is holding too many people back, and that makes no sense. It's working the opposite, right, of what it should be doing.
Yeah. You should be able to just pick up a couple of, you know, some part-time work or, you know, seasonal work without having to jump through hoops with the welfare system.
It's just, yeah, whenever we talk about this, it just drives me bonkers that we punish people for working. When you say it, and it doesn't actually matter how many times I hear it or I see the graphs or I see the information, it doesn't matter how many times I see it, because it still astounds me that is the system that has been enabled for decades now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just wish more people would hear about a UBI, tell other people about a UBI. You know, who cares what party implements it? It's the right policy for our country right now.
Yeah, definitely. Like if someone else takes it on in government, that's a win, isn't it? Like, yeah,
exactly. And that's something that I think people really struggle to get their head around with top, is because we care so much about the policy, and we couldn't care what colour, what other party would pick up our policies. If they pick them up, that's great.
Yeah.
They need help with policy making, so have it out.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be mean. Sometimes they come up with policies, like when National picked up our policy to remove the fringe benefit tax on low emissions vehicles. That was good. They did copy it, and that was great. We would add, obviously, to also not have that tax on electric bikes as well, but at least it was a strong start.
That is a good step in the right direction, definitely.
Yeah, one of the businesses that I gave a leaflet to this afternoon sort of said, oh, getting rid of fringe benefit tax, that's good. So I think he's hopeful.
Yeah, well, that's awesome to hear, because, you know, right now we all subsidise double cab utes. I don't think people realise that. There's a reason why businesses are buying double cab utes. It's because they're subsidised, they don't pay the fringe benefit tax on them. So we want to move it. If they're going to get a benefit in that way, that's fine. Let's support the businesses, but let's make sure it's in low emissions vehicles, so they then trickle through the market when we go to buy them secondhand.
Yeah.
Rather than double cab utes. So that's cool, Helen. That's really awesome to hear that. You know, there's support out there for that shift.
It's been a good day today. Quite a lot of the businesses were very receptive when I don't say very much to them because we're all in a hurry to get through everybody. But I think Okua is lots of people support top there.
It's great to hear. It's so great to hear. I think that's another thing, right? You know, we are all in such different areas. Whangārei to where I am in the North Shore, and Helen, where you are, compared to where, you know, Joel is in Southland. Our support base is just so broad, and people come to us from all walks of life, all parts of society, and from all parts of the typical political spectrum, right? And I think that has always been one of my most favorite things about TOP, is how eclectic we are. And I think why I was so excited for tonight is that we have our oldest and our youngest candidate here. And I love that. I love how eclectic, and some people, want to still try and put us into some sort of a box. And the amount of times that I see people joke about, the top bros and all that kind of stuff. Honestly, I know they're joking and they think it's funny, but like, how funny is it? It's just like bloke humor, when we are so much more than just a bunch of blokes, as amazing, by the way, as the blokes on our team are, and they're freaking awesome. But there's a lot of us here. Anyway, I shouldn't rant on, because it's not about me.
Having such a variety of people in the party makes it hard to choose which areas to campaign hard and such, because they might be anywhere, our supporters.
Yeah, well, that's just it. We are so broad. And the other thing that I might just jump in there is that, we're actually getting an increase in support from older women now. And that hadn't typically been a big support base for TOP. And that's just growing in recent weeks. So yeah, we are just obviously hitting the button with a bunch of different people who have just been looking for something different. So if anyone's joined, feel free to ask any questions. We have Ciara as our candidate in Whangārei, and Helen is our candidate up in Northland. So do feel free if you have any questions at all. And yeah, obviously we've been covering off their key issues in their electorates, and what's super important up in the north is hugely dealing with welfare traps and the highest number of unemployed or job seekers in the country currently.
Yeah.
And that's not counting the ones who actually have had to go to Auckland to look for jobs.
True. Yeah. Yeah.
Some of our young people are not here, but still we've got higher unemployment.
That's such a good point. And that's an excellent point, and it's probably lesser spoken about, the amount of people that are leaving to try and find work elsewhere because it's just not there. And the industries aren't getting the support, the businesses aren't getting the support that they need, sadly. And they are, as you see all the time, and as you've both mentioned, and they are really suffering.
Yeah.
I know that generally, UBI is certainly, we've covered that a bit tonight, and that's certainly the biggest issue in both of your electorates, really. But do you talk about housing as an issue? Does that come up as much up there?
It has come up as a question. I didn't answer it, but it was one that we had to draw a question out of the hat, and that was one of the issues that someone else spoke on. Because
was that at a Meet the Candidates evening?
Yeah, sorry. But it is becoming an issue. Like, if you see that graph, it's affecting the whole of the country, like the rise in house pricing. But we are sort of getting, I can't remember the term they use, but we kind of get like a flow and effect from Auckland, because people start to move up to Whangārei and Northland. Once the house prices start to get too expensive in Auckland, they're buying up now in Whangārei, because they get better value for it up here. But now we're sort of starting to see that it's becoming more unaffordable here now. And there are big housing developments that are happening, but it's still not really the main thing, right? Like, there are still a lot of empty houses up here. I think 40 to 50% might even be like secondary homes that are just used as holiday homes up this way. And so when you think about that, and how there's a lot of empty houses that could be used for actual housing, that is a big issue if housing is getting more expensive up this way as well. Yeah. Exactly,
because it's not really, in theory, a lack of enough houses. It's just how they're being used, right?
Yeah.
And there's no incentive for them to be let throughout the year.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of worry about compliance costs in buildings. A lot of people want to have tiny homes or small homes on the Marae land, Maori-owned land. A lot of alternative things that people want to do in Northland, and compliance is a big issue.
Which we do talk about the changes that we want to see in our Building Aotearoa policy, which is heavily focused, mind you, on heavy urban areas. So I'd be interested to talk to Brendan a little bit more around the more rural, because it does affect rural areas as well in Northland, right, Helen? And as you're saying, so clearly broader changes are needed, and it shouldn't be so restrictive if they want to build small affordable housing for their community on their land, if it is safe. And oftentimes there are current housing stock around the country, whether it's ex Housing New Zealand, Kāinga Ora land, or whoever's currently managing it, that is so unfit for purpose that from a health and safety perspective, people would be far safer in a dry, small house than in these 1950s, old state houses. And the state of repair of so many of them is quite horrendous. And, I know of a builder working in the outskirts of Rotorua and seeing the disrepair of so many houses that have just not been taken care of for so long. And what a failure that is. And yet, as you're saying, Helen, there are communities quite prepared to house more people on their land, and they're just meeting these restrictions.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous, right? So yeah, that's really interesting actually, Helen. I hadn't heard about that particularly. I don't know a lot about what's going on in those more rural areas. So that's, I've always hearing from you what you're getting back in your community as well. So interesting.
Yes, so I'm relating to what you said about Rotorua. We've got a lot of houses that need a lot of maintenance up here in Northland. And I think that that's something that people would do for themselves if they had the unconditional basic income, and their neighbours did too. They would be doing these jobs for each other, getting their houses up to standard and better insulated.
Yeah.
And then it would just give people the freedom to maintain their houses, because they would have that little bit of extra cash that they could fix something if it was necessary. But for so many people, just having that extra amount of cash would be a luxury, right?
Yeah,
definitely.
And we wonder why we have to spend over $5 billion a year on respiratory disease and the significant damage that our poor housing stock is doing. It's just awful. It's
Yeah.
awful to hear about.
I mean, Northland, we have diseases that shouldn't happen in a first world country happen in the Northland area. And that's because of these poor quality of homes that we have. They're just unsafe to live in. And it's also a warm climate. It shouldn't be, people shouldn't be getting as sick as they do. So yeah, it's definitely needs to be better standards around that, definitely.
Do you think in part that, Whangārei and Northland don't typically have that loud of a voice? And yes, the only times we seem to hear much about what's going on up there is because Shane Jones is, doing something, but the story's about really him rather than the communities. And
yeah, I think there is,
what it feels like.
I think that, I'm not too sure really, how, I don't think Whangārei and Northland get much say in the media, definitely. And with Shane Jones, a lot of people like him and, New Zealand First up this way because they promise funding up this way. And you can't blame them because they do get, to some extent, some projects, whether it's not, in their power to or not, happen up this way. Although there's some things like, you know, nearby me in Ruakaka, the recreation centre there's been promises of a new building there that, you know, they promised about $2 million of funding, but to actually build a new building, it costs $7 million. So they have to try and get $5 million extra dollars to do it, where in reality, they need to just put their, upgrade their fire safety, equipment in their current facility, and that only costs $100,000. So it's just like, I just don't know. I think politicians really like to have the grandiose, you know, new buildings and
ribbon cutting.
And that's a huge problem up in Whangārei, because we do have such a lack of infrastructure and lack of facilities in general that, you know, we feel like we need that, but there are a lot of better ways to go about just upgrading and maintaining what we currently have, and better cost benefit for the, you know, for that.
And do you, either of you, maybe a question for both of you, but are you happy with what the current government has done? This is a question from Andrew. Are you happy with what the current government has done to try and create jobs in Northland?
Oh, I'll leave that with you, Helen. Yeah.
Really.
I'm very suspicious of the, you know, so we've got some money being spent on more water storage. Well, that's good because we've had really bad drought, but I'm suspicious that it may be used for irrigation of crops, you know. So we have this policy in the Opportunities Party of the right farming in the right places, and I think if we have a lot of water storage, you know, we need that for the people. We don't need that for the wrong crops. Thank you. And there's lots of the things, you know, that these big projects, these ribbon cutting projects, they might provide jobs for a few people, but they tend not to last, and we have to do a proper cost benefit analysis of whether they're really going to deliver something worth having while they're employing people. There's no point employing people if you're not going to get something worthwhile at the end of it. And you know, I think that what Northland needs is the unconditional basic income, and then we can employ each other, maintaining each other's houses, doing those little things that really help the people. Yeah,
I think there's lack of long-term thinking, like as what Helen was saying. There's like these projects that might employ some for a shorter period of time, but long-term they don't really have the benefits of actually maintaining people in employment. So yeah, I don't really have a solution exactly, but I think the universal basic income is definitely going to be a help with that. But yeah, I don't think that they've done a good job at sort of thinking long-term for Northland, definitely.
And anecdotally, I heard Shane Jones on Talkback a couple of weeks ago, and he couldn't even quantify the amount of jobs that have been created in Northland as part of the Regional Growth Fund.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you can analyse where good spending is happening or not happening when you don't even have the numbers to back up decisions being made. So
no, well, they don't do a cost benefit analysis clearly, because then projects like the one I just said about the Ruakaka Recreation Centre wouldn't happen. You know.
So true. It's just
it's a really nice project in Whangārei to restore a historic wharf, but I'm not sure how many jobs it's going to create. And it's the kind of thing that we really should have crowdfunding for. I think, you know, it's not COVID recovery. It's a really nice project, but it's not going to help the people.
That's just it seemed to be whoever were the loudest voices.
That's the one.
manage to demand that their projects get prioritised. But as you say, Helen, that didn't create barely any jobs. So great for a very, very short term for a very, very small number of people.
The other thing is I went to a regional council meeting, and actually they were talking more. So we do have some water storage that's come for Kaipara, but there is more water storage and more research needed, the regional council was saying, and that the projects that are getting the funding are ones that are shovel ready, and the regional council couldn't quite get their projects, which are much more worthwhile, but maybe are longer term and need more planning, and they couldn't get them quite up to the stage where they could be said to be shovel ready and could have some money thrown at them. And it's like, if you're not ready today, you've missed out.
Yeah, which such short-term thinking, right?
Yeah.
Just on repeat.
Yeah. Seems to be a trend, doesn't it? Like making mistakes with these shovel-ready projects.
Exactly, and people aren't appreciating it. There was gosh, what was it? I mean, I'm going to say the wrong figure here, so someone can fact check me, but down in the Waikato, they spent, $500,000 on a playground and just things like that. It's just bonkers. Or it might have even been more than that. Someone, if anyone's watching, you can Google it. But just, where is good spending happening? And it seems like that's just sort of gone out the window as long as they look to be spending money and look to be employing people today. That's all that they're judged on, what's happening today, right now, not long-term sustainable business creation, not long-term sustainable employment.
Yeah.
I guess maybe they just thought
right.
they just had to do, the bare minimum to get them through to the election. But that's the cynic in me. Hopefully that wasn't it at all. Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed speaking with both of you this evening. Thank you so much for coming on, especially you, Helen, dialing in from your backpackers. I so appreciate that. And see you both.
Thanks for having us, Shai.
This room is used so infrequently that the guy saw the light on. He thought there was something wrong. He better come and turn it off. He popped in to turn the light off, and there's somebody here.
Aucklanders, don't only go to Queenstown, go up to the north as well on your weekends. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, can I say a story that it is quite, because it's so unpopulated up here, I got to swim with dolphins for free once in my life because we were can't remember, it was somewhere in the Bay of Islands. I can't exactly remember where, but yeah, we just walked into this cove and there was a pod of dolphins there and we got to swim with them. So there's a lot of beauty up here, and I think people should really consider, as you said, Shai, coming up this way on their weekends.
Definitely. Get out there, Aucklanders. Okay, or anyone else. Okay.
Any of them in this, and the fact that they have you don't have to be in the dorm rooms. There are more expensive and ones with en suites and things. and a lot of them are empty, so come.
Totally. All right, take care, both of you, and thank you everybody for tuning in this evening, and hope you're doing well. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shai. Bye.